April 7, 1944. Inside Auschwitz-Birkenau, a 19-year-old prisoner named Rudolf Vrba lies buried alive in a woodpile. SS bloodhounds claw at the planks inches from his skull. One breath too loud, and the dogs tear him apart. For 21 months, Vrba has been memorizing this death camp gas chamber dimensions, cremation rates, transport schedules. But he's discovered something the outside world doesn't know. The Nazis are building new infrastructure designed to exterminate 800,000 Hungarian Jews in weeks. That intelligence exists in one place in his skull. No documents, no microfilm, nothing written down. One sound in this woodpile, and 800,000 people die without warning. But here's what makes this impossible. No one has ever escaped Auschwitz alive. Vrba's plan isn't to outrun the wire. He'll hide motionless for 72 hours, then walk 80 miles through Nazi-occupied Poland with no weapons, no papers, no compass, and dictate testimony that will save 200,000 lives. The world received his report and took 6 weeks to act. Every day it sat on a desk, 12,000 more people entered the gas chambers. How did a teenager outsmart the deadliest camp ever built? And what did that silence cost? June 1942. A cattle car door slides open on a rail siding at Auschwitz, and a 17-year-old boy named Walter Rosenberg stumbles into the light. He is Jewish Slovak, ripped from the town of Topolchany, and he will not use that name again for years. The SS shave his head, strip him naked, and punch a number into his left forearm 44070. The sequence has already passed 28,600. Every digit is a ghost. The boy who will become Rudolf Vrba is sent next door to Birkenau, the extermination annex, and assigned to labor details near the arrival ramp. This placement will change the course of the war, because the ramp is where the selection happens, and Vrba sees everything. Trains grind in from across occupied Europe almost every day, sometimes 2 or 3 in a single afternoon. Families spill onto the platform clutching suitcases they were told to label with their names and addresses, a final cruelty, since the suitcases will be sorted by prisoners in the Canada barracks, and the owners will be ash before sunset. SS officers split them with a flick of the wrist. Left means gas, right means labor. Vrba watches, and he begins to count. He memorizes the transport schedules, the guard rotations, the layout of every block and fence. He tracks which nationalities arrive on which days. He estimates arrival numbers against the camp's registration ledger and realizes that the gap between people who enter Auschwitz and people who receive tattoo numbers is enormous. Tens of thousands arrive and simply cease to exist within hours. The gap is the gas chambers, and Vrba is one of the only prisoners close enough to the ramp to measure it. Over the following months, the arithmetic sharpens into something unbearable. Auschwitz is not a prison. It is an industrial killing line operating at planned capacity. The gas chambers can murder thousands in a single operation. When the first new crematorium was tested in March 1943, the SS staged what they called a demonstration gassing. 8,000 Jews from the Krakow ghetto killed in one day while high-ranking officials watched through a glass peephole. Vrba files the details in memory. He records gassing durations, oven throughput, corpse processing rates. By early 1944, more than 1 million people have been murdered at Birkenau. Each statistic Vrba memorizes is a fuse waiting for a match. But what good is a fuse if no one outside the wire ever hears it burn? Vrba also studies failure. Auschwitz breeds escape fantasies and kills them in public. Every failed breakout triggers the same protocol, a 72-hour lockdown, the entire outer perimeter sealed, bloodhounds raking every meter of ground, and collective punishment for the prisoner's block. No fugitive has survived it. The escapes fail because they all share the same fatal logic. The prisoners try to outrun the perimeter. They sprint for the wire and the dogs run faster. Vrba studies each failure the way an engineer studies a crash report. He catalogs what went wrong, at which point in the sequence the fugitive was detected, and what the guards did in response. And he realizes that beating Auschwitz will not be a sprint through the wire. It will have to be something the SS have never even considered, something that exploits the one assumption built into their own protocol. In early 1944, the final piece drops into place. Vrba notices fresh concrete slabs hardening under open sky near the new crematoria. He watches Austrian engineers installing gas pipes into structures that have no other possible purpose. Extended rail tracks now reach directly into Birkenau's interior, eliminating the truck convoys that previously moved prisoners from the main Auschwitz rail station. The construction is massive, rushed, and pointed in one direction capacity. All of it leads Vrba to one conclusion: the Nazis are tooling up for Hungary. 800,000 Jews who have so far avoided mass deportation, who still believe the rumors are exaggerated, who have received no warning from any government or relief organization, and who have no idea that an infrastructure of murder is being purpose-built for them at this very moment. Hungary's Jewish population is the last major community in occupied Europe that has not been liquidated. Vrba understands that the new rail extensions, the additional gas chambers, the expanded cremation ovens, all of it is designed to process an entire nation's Jewish population in a matter of weeks. How much time does Vrba have before the first Hungarian transport rolls? And who among the 250,000 prisoners of Auschwitz could possibly help him beat the clock? Vrba finds his answer in a fellow Slovak prisoner named Alfred Wetzler. At 25, Wetzler is older, quieter, and deeply embedded in the camp's hidden networks. His assignment to the Canada sorting barracks, where inmates process the belongings of the murdered, has given him access to documents, odd jobs, and information the SS never intended a prisoner to possess. Wetzler has survived Auschwitz by being invisible. Vrba has survived it by watching everything. Together they form the only combination that might actually work. The two men whisper in Slovak across a barracks table, never when guards are near, never when another prisoner might overhear. Trust inside Auschwitz is a calculation, not a feeling. Every conversation is a risk assessment. Betrayal is a death sentence measured in minutes, and both men know it. Together they dissect the anatomy of every failed escape. The pattern is always the same. A prisoner runs. The SS seal the outer perimeter for 72 hours. The dogs find the scent. The fugitive dies. So, Vrba and Wetzler invert the logic entirely. They will not run. They will hide inside the perimeter. Let the SS lock down the fences, deploy the dogs, burn the barracks with searchlights for 3 full days. Vrba and Wetzler will be crouching motionless just outside the inner camp fence, still within the outer ring, invisible. Every other escapee tried to beat the system by moving faster than it. These two will beat it by staying completely still. After 72 hours, the protocol expires. The SS assume any escapee has already crossed the wire. They release the cordon. And then, only then, 2 starving men walk out of a death camp in the dark. The hiding spot is a masterstroke of prisoner ingenuity. Sympathetic inmates have hollowed out a cavity inside a massive woodpile stacked between the inner and outer fences, a space barely large enough for 2 men to lie flat, shoulders touching, faces inches from damp wood. The surrounding boards have been soaked in a mixture of tobacco juice and gasoline over several nights, a few drops at a time so the guards would not notice the smell. When the dogs sniff the pile, all they detect is tar and rot. The plan demands absolute stillness for 3 days. No coughing, no shifting weight, no sound louder than a breath. One involuntary noise, and the cavity becomes a coffin. If you're getting value from this story, a story most history books never tell, hit subscribe. Because the second half of what happened to Vrba is even harder to believe than the first. Through the resistance network, Vrba and Wetzler gather provisions, scraps of bread, a rough-drawn map of the Slovak border region, and a small amount of currency. They have no weapons, no forged papers, no outside contacts waiting at a rendezvous point. What they have instead is something no forger can produce and no guard can confiscate: 21 months of memorized evidence that the world has never seen. Every transport manifest, every cremation figure, every layout detail that proves the Nazis are lying about what Auschwitz really is. That dossier is the cargo. The escape is just the delivery vehicle. On the evening of April 7th, 1944, Vrba and Wetzler lower themselves into the woodpile cavity. Planks are sealed over them from the outside by hands they will never see again. The last sliver of gray sky disappears. They lie in total darkness, pressed against cold earth, lungs shallow, hearts hammering, listening to the footsteps of the men who just sealed them in grow fainter and disappear into the camp noise. Somewhere beyond the wood, the crematoria chimneys still glow. The Hungarian transports could begin any day. Vrba has seen the rail extensions, the new ovens, the fresh concrete hardening in the cold. Every hour inside this woodpile is an hour the construction crews keep working. And now 2 men must survive 3 days of silence so absolute that even their heartbeat feels like a betrayal. But there is a problem Vrba has not accounted for. What happens when the dogs don't just sniff the pile but start clawing at the boards directly above his face? And how long can 2 men stay completely still while the SS tear the camp apart searching for them? Morning roll call. The SS count and recount. 2 numbers are missing. Klaxons shatter the dawn. German voices crack across the camp. 2 prisoners gone. Within minutes, the lockdown protocol activates. Floodlights sweep the perimeter. Guards double at every tower, and bloodhounds are unleashed between the fences. Vrba and Wetzler lie frozen inside the woodpile. Dogs skid across the lumber, nails scraping bark inches from their skulls. Vrba's heart slams against the earth. The hounds nose along the boards, inhale, and break off. The tobacco-gasoline mixture holds. The dogs smell nothing human. Hours crawl past. Cramps lock Vrba's legs. Thirst claws at his throat. He does not move. Day 2, Day 3. The SS escalate, burning outbuildings, beating prisoners for information, howling threats into the night. Inside the woodpile, time collapses into a single sustained act of will. Vrba cannot stretch his legs. He cannot roll onto his back. The cold earth beneath him has soaked through his clothes and into his bones, and the only thing he can move without risk is his mind, so he runs escape routes in his head, kilometer by kilometer, rehearsing terrain he has only seen on a hand-drawn map. Vrba replays the geography of every failed escape he has catalogued, tracing routes in his mind, rehearsing the terrain between Auschwitz and the Slovak border. Wetzler controls his breathing beside him, sometimes mouthing soundless words. The darkness is total. The cold is constant. Every crack of lumber, every distant bark, freezes both men for minutes at a time. The 72-hour clock drains 1 heartbeat at a time. Then the cordon lifts. The SS follow protocol. After 3 days, the assumption is that any escapee has already crossed the outer wire, and the extra patrols stand down, one by one, until the perimeter returns to its normal rhythm. Vrba and Wetzler wait until full dark. They pry the boards apart and drag themselves out, joints screaming, muscles atrophied, mouths cracked with dehydration. Vrba tries to stand, and his legs buckle. They have not been vertical in 72 hours. They crouch in the darkness, breathing open air for the first time in 3 days, and the smell of the crematoria is still there. It is always there. They have not eaten a real meal in 3 days. They have not stood upright in 72 hours. They are inside the zone between the inner and outer fences of the most heavily guarded death camp on Earth. They crouch in the darkness, waiting, listening, watching the tower searchlights sweep in their predictable arcs. They wait one more night, timing the gaps between patrols. Then they slip through the outer wire and step onto Polish soil for the first time in nearly 2 years. The second ordeal begins immediately. 80 miles of Nazi-occupied countryside separate them from the Slovak border. They have no compass, only the stars, and the rough map Vrba memorized from a hand-drawn sketch provided by the camp resistance. They move at night, navigating forest trails and stream beds, ducking behind trees when headlights appear on distant roads. By day, they burrow into barns, drainage ditches, riverbank undercuts, anywhere a body can press flat and disappear. German patrols pass within meters, dogs bark in the distance and fall silent. Wetzler's feet blister raw against the frozen ground. Vrba's vision blurs from hunger and exhaustion. They eat what they can scavenge, raw roots, crusts from abandoned farmhouses, and snow. Each mile they cover is another mile the information survives. Each patrol that misses them is another roll of the dice that lands right. 11 nights of walking, freezing, starving, dodging German soldiers through terrain neither man has seen before, and the whole time Vrba carries no documents, no microfilm, no physical evidence of any kind. Everything is in his head: transport numbers, gas chamber blueprints, cremation rates, the construction timetable for the Hungarian operation. If he collapses on this trail, if a German bullet finds him in the dark, the information dies with his body and 800,000 people walk into the gas chambers unknowing. On April 21st, 1944, Vrba and Wetzler crossed the Slovak border near Skalite. For the first time since June 1942, they stand on soil that is not controlled by the camp. They are free. But freedom is not the mission. The mission is what happens next. And what happens next will depend on whether anyone believes two emaciated barefoot fugitives when they describe an industrial murder operation so vast, it sounds like madness. How fast can the truth travel through a bureaucracy that does not want to hear it? And how many people will die for every day it sits on a desk? Within days, Vrba and Wetzler reach the Jewish underground in Žilina, Slovakia. Over 3 consecutive nights, April 25th through 27th, they dictate everything. In rapid Slovak and German, they produce a 33-page document that will become known as the Vrba-Wetzler Report, later called the Auschwitz Protocol. It contains camp maps drawn from memory, block numbers, transport schedules, gas chamber dimensions, cremation capacities, the step-by-step mechanics of how Zyklon B pellets are dropped through ceiling vents, how long it takes a chamber full of people to die, how the Sonderkommando drags the bodies to the ovens. They describe the March 1943 demonstration gassing of 8,000 Krakow Jews in clinical detail. They list the nationalities of the murdered Czech, French, Dutch, Greek, Polish, Slovak, every number cross-checked, every layout verified against Wetzler's independent memory. This is not testimony. It is an engineering report on genocide. By April 28th, the document is typed, translated into German and Hungarian, and dispatched. Vrba and Wetzler hand it to Jewish community leaders in Bratislava with a single instruction to warn Hungary immediately. Every Jew in that country must know that resettlement to the east means a gas chamber at the end of a rail line. The Nazis have used this exact language before, in Slovakia, in the Netherlands, in Greece, and each time the people who boarded the trains believed they were going to labor camps. Vrba has now provided the proof that resettlement is a euphemism for murder, and the proof includes architectural details so specific that no one can dismiss it as rumor. Couriers carry copies toward Budapest, toward the Swiss consulate, toward the Vatican, toward the International Red Cross in Geneva. Each copy travels by hand, through checkpoints, across borders, tucked inside ordinary envelopes that look nothing like the most important document of the war. The fuse Vrba lit inside Auschwitz is burning toward the people who have the power to act, if they choose to. But bureaucracies move at the speed of caution, not urgency. The report passes through committee after committee. Diplomats read it and hesitate. How can 400,000 people simply vanish? Jewish leaders in Budapest debate whether to publicize the report or suppress it. Some fear that panic will make the situation worse. Others worry that the information is too horrific for the public to process. Copies are filed, meetings are scheduled, memoranda are drafted and revised. For 2 critical weeks, the Auschwitz Protocol circulates in whispers and filing cabinets while the clock bleeds out. On May 15, 1944, barely 3 weeks after Vrba and Wetzler finished dictating, the first Hungarian deportation trains pull out of the countryside ghettos, exactly as Vrba predicted, on the exact rail extensions he described in his report. 12,000 Jews per day, packed into cattle cars, rolling directly toward the new rail extensions that Vrba watched being built inside Birkenau. The infrastructure he described in his report is now operating at designed capacity. Every day the document sits unacted upon, another 12,000 people enter the gas chambers. How long does it take for the most important document of the war to reach someone willing to act on it? And how many lives does each day of delay cost? The report finally breaks into public view in mid-June when a Salvadoran diplomat named George Mandel Mantello obtains a copy in Switzerland and forces it into newspapers and radio broadcasts across the neutral world. A global outcry erupts, headlines in Zurich, condemnations from London, pressure from Washington. But by then, the deportation trains have been running for a full month. 147 transports have carried approximately 434,000 Hungarian Jews to Auschwitz. The vast majority, men, women, children, the elderly, were selected for the gas chambers within hours of arrival, never receiving a tattoo, never entering the camp as registered prisoners. Vrba's report was accurate in every architectural detail, every operational procedure, every estimated capacity figure, and it arrived too late to save them. The information traveled at the speed of paper. The trains traveled at the speed of rail. What force on earth could still stop the killing before it consumed every last Jewish community in Hungary? And had Vrba's 33 pages of testimony already arrived too late to matter? July 1944. The Auschwitz Protocol is now front-page news in Zurich, London, and New York. Swiss newspapers print Vrba's eyewitness descriptions of the gas chambers. The BBC broadcasts summaries. Pope Pius XII sent a personal appeal to Hungarian regent Miklos Horthy. President Roosevelt warns that anyone complicit in the deportations will face justice. On July 2nd, American B-17 bombers strike targets near Budapest, a blunt signal that the Allies are watching. 4 days later, on July 7th, Horthy orders the deportations halted. The trains stop. The Jews of Budapest, roughly 200,000 men, women, and children who were days away from deportation, are spared. They survive because a 19-year-old prisoner memorized murder rates and construction schedules, hid in a woodpile for 3 days without making a sound, walked 80 miles through enemy territory on bleeding feet, and dictated 33 pages of testimony so precise that no government could dismiss it once the newspapers forced them to read it. Now count the mathematics of delay. 434,000 Hungarian Jews were deported between May 15th and July 7th. Most were killed within hours of arrival, selected at the ramp, and marched directly to the gas chambers Vrba had described in exact dimensions. 200,000 in Budapest survived because the Auschwitz Protocol generated enough pressure to force Horthy's hand. The gap between those numbers is measured not in courage, but in weeks. Every week the report sat on a desk being verified, debated, filed, and forwarded. Approximately 12,000 more people per day entered the gas chambers. Vrba carried the truth out of the most secure death camp ever constructed. The world received it, read it, and then the world paused to discuss what to do about it. That pause cost more lives than most battles of the Second World War. 200,000 saved. That is an extraordinary number, proof that one act of witness, one escape, one document can bend the trajectory of mass murder. But Vrba knew it should have been 800,000. The gap is not a statistical footnote. It is the central wound of this story, and Vrba refused to let anyone treat it as anything less. Courage was never the missing ingredient. A 17-year-old boy who memorized a death factory for 21 months and then buried himself alive to carry the evidence out had more courage than any institution that received his report. The failure was bureaucratic. The failure was psychological. The inability to believe that industrial genocide was physically possible, even when confronted with an engineering diagram that proved it. The failure was political. Leaders who calculated that acting on the report carried more risk than ignoring it. Vrba spent the remaining 62 years of his life making that argument. He emigrated to Canada, became a biochemistry professor, raised a family, but he never stopped testifying. He confronted Jewish leaders who he believed had deliberately suppressed his report to avoid chaos. He gave depositions. He wrote a memoir. He stood in lecture halls and described the smell of the crematoria to audiences who shifted in their seats. He was not interested in being called a hero. He was interested in accountability, in forcing the world to answer why 200,000 were saved when 800,000 could have been. He died in Vancouver on March 27, 2006, at the age of 81, largely unknown outside Holocaust scholarship. The man who broke out of Auschwitz and delivered the proof of genocide to a world that took 6 weeks to open the envelope. We came to this story expecting an escape. The woodpile, the dogs, the 80 miles of frozen terrain. But the real escape was not physical. It was informational. Vrba did not break out of Auschwitz to save himself. He broke out to move a 33-page document from one side of a fence to the other. The race was never between a prisoner and his guards. It was between knowledge and time. Knowledge won, 200,000 people in Budapest are the proof. But time won too, by exactly the number of weeks it took the world to read what one teenager had memorized in ash and bone. If you want to see what happens when a US citizen accidentally becomes the CIA's best asset inside North Korea, builds a spy network through bribery, gets caught on a USB handoff in broad daylight, and still walks free years later during high-level diplomacy, click here.